Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're breaking down a radically different approach to human interaction. If you're tired of arguments that go absolutely nowhere, of feeling overshadowed, or dealing with people who just try to dominate the room with sheer volume, you are in exactly the right place. We're going to deconstruct Friedrich Nietzsche's philosophy to reveal how silence isn't just an absence of words, it's actually a highly tactical, highly energetic tool for absolute mastery. Let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. We've all been there, right? You say everything you need to say, you lay out all the facts, you supposedly win the debate, yet you walk away with this frustrating knot in your throat. It honestly feels like every single word you spoke just drained your power instead of asserting it. That's the core problem of verbal conflict. We think we're defending our strength, but a lot of times we're really just exposing our exhaustion. Society teaches us a massive falsehood. We're completely conditioned to believe that staying quiet is a sign of weakness. That if you don't react or defend yourself, you're just surrendering to the loudest person in the room. But Nietzsche proposes a much more lethal, strategic path. He saw that true power has never actually been in words, but in their absence. Silence disconcerts. It destabilizes. It is an overwhelming presence.
Section 1. The Illusion of Argument.
So, to understand how to wield this presence, we first need to break down why we feel this burning, almost physical need to constantly rebut, correct others, and passionately defend our ideas. Well, it comes down to herd morality. This is essentially the behavior of those who live under the expectations of others, constantly seeking approval and validation just to be seen as correct. Arguing, for the most part, is really just a symptom of our own fragile ego seeking validation from the herd. We're terrified of appearing weak, so we turn every single conversation into a battlefield, falsely believing that if our opinions are shaken, our entire identity is just going to crumble.
On one side, we've got the reactive ego. This mindset desperately seeks power through argumentation, using words as defensive armor to try and maintain control of a narrative. But on the other side, we have strategic silence. This mindset finds true strength in unwavering internal mastery. It holds its vision even in the face of laughter, criticism, or rejection without ever feeling the need to explain itself. So the crucial point is this. The exact moment you feel compelled to justify yourself to a manipulator or a loudmouth, you've already entered their game. You've surrendered your power. By trying to prove your point, you're literally signaling that you still care about being accepted and validated by them.
Section 2. Psychology of the Unspoken.
What happens when words fail them, and they're met only with your silence? To master this chaotic psychological battlefield, Nietzsche introduces us to the Übermensch, or the Overman. This is a rare, dangerous being who completely transcends common morality. The Übermensch doesn't live by just reacting to the world. They shape it. They don't engage in cheap emotional games or try to win petty debates. Instead, they command respect with their gaze alone, using silence not as some empty space, but as a language of absolute authority.
And that silence of the Übermensch is absolutely terrifying to others because it acts as a mirror. When you choose not to react, you completely strip away your opponent's disguise. Think about it. Most people don't speak to actually express themselves. They speak to hide the emptiness between what they say and who they really are. When you stay silent, you're forcing them to listen to their own unbearable noise.
Mechanically speaking, when you remain silent during a confrontation, it triggers the opponent's amygdala, that's the brain's center for fear and anxiety. Without your reaction, they lose control of the narrative, which completely exposes their hidden insecurities. Manipulators will absolutely panic because they heavily depend on your emotional reaction to validate their position. Suddenly, your lack of reaction acts as an invisible blade. It activates their unresolved traumas and completely destabilizes their ego. You're attacking where it hurts the most, simply by doing nothing.
Section 3. The 4 Strategic Weapons.
Let's move to and see how this builds. Because now that we understand the profound psychology behind all of this, it's time to stop being just an observer. This shifts into a tactical framework. We're going to use 4 specific steps to deploy silence and completely dominate any interaction. First, choosing silence over the reactive ego. Second, surgical observation. Third, the power of the pause. And fourth, becoming unpredictable.
So weapon 1 is brutally simple, but I'll warn you, it's the hardest to execute. You have to kill the reactive ego. Everything inside you is going to scream for a response. You'll desperately want to prove you're right, but that desire, it's poison. True silence is only born when you kill the part of you that still cares about playing their game. You owe absolutely nothing to anyone, and the truth really doesn't need to be spoken aloud to exist. Next up is weapon 2, surgical observation. While everyone else is getting lost in their own explanations, you just listen. But you aren't listening like a normal person waiting for their turn to speak. You listen like a hunter tracking prey. You're observing their subtle contradictions, picking up on the insecurities they try to disguise as arrogance. You're gathering intelligence so that if you do choose to speak later, your strike will be surgical and it will be devastating.
Then we have weapon 3, the power of the pause. The pause is pure tension, and tension is pure power. When the other person finishes speaking and they're waiting for your reaction, and it just doesn't come, they experience a total internal collapse. The void of silence creates this unbearable pressure, filling their mind with assumptions and paranoia.
And that brings us to weapon 4, unpredictability. When you truly master silence, people simply don't know what to expect from you. By withholding your reactions, you invert the entire logic of the interaction. You go from being reactive to becoming the gravitational center of the room. You become feared in the best possible sense of the word, forcing opponents to cautiously measure every single word they say when they're around you. Section 4, the trap of submission.
Now, a quick warning here. We need to make sure you aren't confusing strategic dominance with simply emotionally surviving a manipulator. There is a massive world of difference between domesticated surrender and active dominance. Swallowing your anger, giving in during discussions, and avoiding conflict at all costs just to keep the peace, that's not wisdom. That is exactly what Nietzsche called slave morality. It's a really dangerous conditioning where you shrink yourself down just to survive in a room.
What you call peace is often just your domesticated surrender. This is such a hard-hitting point. You might think you're being the bigger person by staying quiet, but in reality, manipulators might currently be building an entire empire on your false peace. They take full advantage of your calmness, they push their ideas, and they occupy your spaces because they know for a fact you will never react.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how we break free from that trap. You have to understand that the true will to power isn't about shouting louder than the manipulator. It's about regaining absolute control of your own narrative. We have to kill that submissive silence and replace it with an undeniable presence. We're talking about a silence that doesn't bend, doesn't humiliate itself, and absolutely does not apologize for existing.
Section 5, mastering your own presence.
The weak shout, the strong remain silent. Your silence has to stop being an escape route right now. It must become an invisible, authoritative boundary. It's the stillness of a warrior who has already won the battle before it even begins, simply because they know exactly who they are and exactly what they deserve.
So the world really doesn't need more talkers. Take a hard look at your own life. How many times have you let others dictate the narrative because you are playing that reactive game? Will you continue to let your fragile ego drag you into the noise, or will you choose the strategic silence that commands immediate respect? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Until next time, stay focused. Welcome